The sound of the slap didn't just echo across the restaurant, it froze time. Crystal chandeliers swayed slightly overhead as the sharp crack bounced off marble floors and velvet walls. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks hovered inches above porcelain plates. Even the soft instrumental music seemed to hesitate, as if unsure whether it was allowed to keep playing. Ava Mitchell's head turned to the side from the impact. For half a second, she didn't feel pain. Then her baby cried. The sound ripped through Ava's chest harder than the slap itself. Emma's tiny face scrunched up in terror, her little fists clenching the fabric of Ava's dress as if the world had suddenly become unsafe. Ava instinctively tightened her around her daughter, rocking her gently despite the burning sting spreading across her cheek. "I'm sorry," Ava whispered to Emma, her voice trembling but controlled. "It's okay, Mommy's here." Across from her stood Victoria Sterling. Perfect posture, perfect makeup, perfect cruelty. Victoria's manicured hand was still raised, fingers slightly curled, as if she were offended by the idea of touching someone like Ava. Her lips curled in disgust as she looked down at the woman holding the crying baby. "You don't reach for things in places you don't belong," Victoria snapped. "Especially not here." Ava slowly turned her face back forward. Her cheek throbbed, her ears rang, but she didn't shout, she didn't cry, she didn't beg. "I only wanted to show my reservation," Ava said quietly. "I have a confirmation email. I wasn't trying to cause trouble." Victoria laughed, not loudly, but sharply, like ice breaking. "Of course you were," she said. "You people always are." The word people landed heavier than the slap. Around them, the restaurant remained seated. Men in expensive suits watched with interest. Women in designer dresses leaned closer, eyes wide, phones already rising from the table. Some whispered, some recorded. No one intervened. Ava noticed all of it. She noticed the way no one met her eyes. She noticed how quickly sympathy turned into entertainment. She noticed the way humiliation felt heavier when it was shared silently by a crowd. Emma's cries grew louder, her tiny body shaking with fear. Ava shifted her weight, steadying herself. Her legs felt weak, but she forced her spine straight. She had learned a long time ago that collapsing only gave cruel people permission to step harder. "I have a reservation under the name Mitchell," she repeated calmly. "Table for two, 7:30. Victoria leaned closer, her perfume sharp and overwhelming. "Let me be clear," she said softly, venom hidden behind politeness. "This restaurant is not for widows in thrift store dresses carrying welfare babies. Take your child and leave before you embarrass yourself further." Ava's fingers curled protectively around Emma's back. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. Instead, she took a slow breath, the kind nurses learn to take when chaos explodes around them, and lifted her gaze. "I'm not leaving," Ava said. The words were quiet, but they landed like a challenge. And upstairs, behind a wall of one-way glass, someone stopped mid-conversation and turned toward the sound. The night had just begun. The silence that followed Ava's words felt heavier than the slap. "I'm not leaving." Victoria stared at her as if she'd just heard a joke told in the wrong language. For a brief moment, disbelief flickered across her face. Then it hardened into something uglier. "Oh," she said slowly, "you think you get a choice." She stepped aside just enough to signal someone unseen. "Security," Victoria called out, her voice smooth and practiced. "And call the police." A murmur rippled through the dining room. Ava felt every eye on her now. Not concerned eyes, curious ones. She could feel judgment pressing in from every direction. The cut of her dress, the lack of jewelry, the baby in her arms where clutches and champagne flutes were supposed to be. Emma's cries softened into hiccuping sobs, her tiny face buried against Ava's chest. Ava rocked her gently, whispering comfort she barely felt herself. "It's okay," she murmured. "I've got you." A waiter hovered nearby, shifting his weight nervously. Their eyes met for half a second. Ava saw something like regret there. And then he looked away. Another couple stared openly. A man smirked as he tilted his phone for a better angle. Someone whispered, "She shouldn't have brought a baby here." No one stood up. No one said, "That's enough." Ava had grown up in places like this moment. Not luxury restaurants, but rooms where adults chose silence over fairness. Foster homes where bruises were ignored. Offices where paperwork mattered more than people. She recognized the pattern instantly. Silence was safer. Victoria folded her arms, satisfaction creeping into her posture. "You see?" she said, gesturing around the room. "No one agrees with you. That should tell you something." Ava swallowed. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure others could hear it. But she didn't lower her head. "I'm not asking for agreement," she said. "I'm asking for what I reserved." Victoria smiled, slow and cruel. "And I'm telling you," she replied, "you don't belong in this world." Footsteps approached from the entrance. Heavy ones, Victoria straightened, anticipation lighting her eyes. Good, she said. Here comes someone who understands how things work. Ava turned just as a uniformed police officer stepped through the doors. And somewhere above them, behind glass no one else could see, a man leaned forward slightly. His attention now fully captured. The game had shifted. The officer didn't pause to assess the situation. He didn't ask what had happened. He didn't look at Ava's tear-streaked baby or red mark blooming on her cheek. He walked in like the outcome was already decided. "What's the problem?" he asked, though his tone made it clear he wasn't interested in the answer. Victoria stepped forward immediately, her voice sweet with manufactured distress. "This woman is trespassing," she said. "She's refusing to leave and disturbing our guests." The officer nodded once, satisfied. "That's so." He turned to Ava, eyes sweeping over her from head to toe. "Identification? I have a reservation?" Ava said. "I haven't broken any law." "I didn't ask about a reservation." He snapped. "I asked for ID." Ava shifted Emma higher on her shoulder, freeing one hand. Her fingers reached for her bag. That was when the officer grabbed it. He yanked the strap off her shoulder and dumped the contents onto the marble floor. The sound was humiliatingly loud. Diapers, a baby bottle, wipes, a cracked phone skidding across the polished surface. Emma screamed again, frightened by the sudden movement. Ava's breath caught. "Please," she said quietly. "Be careful. That's my child's." "Quiet," the officer barked. He crouched, rifling through her belongings like he expected to find contraband instead of formula. Victoria watched with open satisfaction. The officer pulled out Ava's wallet and flipped it open. Cash. He held the bills up between two fingers. $600, he said slowly, smirking. "Funny amount for someone dressed like you." "It's my husband's," Ava said. "He's deceased." The officer scoffed and continued searching. A small photograph slipped out and landed face up on the floor. A wedding photo. Ava and Michael, smiling under courthouse steps, young and hopeful and unaware of what cancer would steal from them. Before Ava could move, the officer stepped forward. His boot came down hard. The photo crumpled beneath it. Ava felt something inside her chest. "Don't," she whispered. The officer leaned closer, breath heavy with coffee and arrogance. "You don't tell me what to do." He grabbed her wrist. "Come on, you're coming with me?" Ava froze. "What about my baby?" she asked, panic rising. "She needs me?" The officer shrugged. "Someone will deal with her." Emma's cries filled the room. And upstairs, the man behind the glass stopped breathing for a moment. Because he had seen this before, a long time ago, through the eyes of a frightened child holding his mother's hand. And he had sworn it would never happen again. Someone will deal with her. The words hit Ava harder than the slap. Her grip tightened instinctively around Emma, her arms locking as if her body could shield her child from the entire world. Emma's cries turned sharp and desperate, the kind that clawed at the heart, the kind that made Ava's vision blur. "No," Ava said, her voice barely louder than a breath. "You can't take her." The officer paused, surprised, not by fear but by resistance. He turned slowly, eyes narrowing. "Excuse me. She's my daughter," Ava said. Her voice shook now, but she didn't lower her gaze. "I haven't done anything wrong. I have a job. I have identification. You don't get to take my child." Victoria let out a soft laugh, the sound dripping with delight. "Oh, please," she said. "You're resisting now. That's obstruction." The officer's lips curled. "You hear that? Now you've made it worse for yourself." He tightened his grip on Ava's wrist. Pain shot up her arm, but she didn't cry out. She was suddenly very aware of Emma's small hands clutching her dress, of the way her baby's body trembled against hers. "Let's go," he said, pulling her toward the door. Ava's feet moved unwillingly. Her mind raced, memories colliding violently. Cold hallways, metal beds, nights when no one came when she cried. An orphanage. The word surfaced like poison. "Stop," Ava said suddenly. The officer turned back again, irritation flashing. "What now?" "You said someone would deal with her," Ava said. Her voice steadied in a way that surprised even her. "You mean child services?" He shrugged. "That's how it works." Ava shook her head once. "No," she said. "That's not how it works." Victoria rolled her eyes. "Take her already. The baby will be better off." Something inside Ava snapped. "I grew up without parents," Ava said louder now. The room went quiet. "I know exactly what that does to a child. You are not taking her from me." The officer laughed, stepping closer until his shadow swallowed her. "You think you have rights here," he said. "You're nobody. This is my badge, my city. If I say your kid goes to the system, she goes." Emma wailed. Ava held her tighter, her arms burning, her body shaking, but she didn't let go. "You can arrest me," Ava said, tears finally spilling. but you will not take my child." For a moment, even Victoria stopped smiling. And upstairs, behind the glass, a man who had built an empire on fear felt something colder rise in his chest. Rage. Pure, focused rage. He turned slowly. "Marco," he said quietly. The meeting was over. Someone was about to answer for what they'd done. High above the dining room, hidden behind a wall of one-way glass, the air in the VIP lounge had gone completely still. 4 powerful men sat around a polished mahogany table, half-finished drinks untouched, their conversation abandoned mid-sentence. No one spoke. No one dared to. Because Roman Corsetti was no longer listening. He stood inches from the glass, tall and unmoving, his reflection faint against the glittering scene below. From this angle, he could see everything. The red mark on Ava's cheek, the officer's hand clamped around her wrist, the baby shaking in her mother's arms. He had watched the entire thing unfold. The insults, the slap, the way the room chose silence. Roman's jaw tightened slowly. Beside him, Marco said nothing. He had learned long ago that when it went quiet like this, words were unnecessary. And dangerous. Roman's eyes followed Ava as she stood her ground, trembling but unbroken. "You can arrest me," she said again below, her voice cracking but resolute, "but you will not take my child." Something inside Roman shifted. The memory hit him without warning. A narrow store on the Upper West Side. Harsh fluorescent lights. A woman clutching his small hand. His mother, standing straight while a clerk sneered at her accent, her clothes, her poverty. Roman had been 8 years old. He remembered the heat in his face. The helplessness. The promise he made that night as he listened to her cry behind a closed bedroom door. He would never allow this again. Not to his mother. Not to anyone. Marco finally spoke, carefully. "Boss the meeting. Cancel it," Roman said. His voice was calm. Too calm. Marco blinked. "All of them?" Roman didn't look away from the glass. Every single one. The men at the table shifted uneasily. Deals worth Rayans evaporated in that moment, but no one protested. Roman turned at last. His gray eyes were cold, sharpened into something lethal. "Call security," he said to Marco, "and get the footage ready." Marco nodded instantly. Roman straightened his jacket, adjusted his cufflinks, and took one last look at the woman below, standing alone in a room full of witnesses who had chosen comfort over courage. Then he walked toward the door. Downstairs, the officer tightened his grip on Ava's wrist, preparing to drag her out, and he had no idea that the most dangerous man in the building was already on his way down. The balance of power was about to change. The sound of footsteps on the staircase was soft, but somehow everyone felt it. The officer had just started pulling Iva toward the entrance when the room seemed to tighten, as if the air itself had drawn a sharp breath. Conversations died mid-whisper. Glasses were lowered. Phones that had been recording slowly dipped out of sight. Someone near the window muttered a name under their breath. The officer didn't hear it. "Move!" He snapped at Ava, yanking her arm again. "Stop!" The word wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. It cut through the room with the weight of command. The officer froze and turned, irritation flashing across his face. "This is a police matter," he barked. "Whoever you are, step back." Roman Corsetti stood at the base of the stairs, perfectly still, perfectly composed. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't flash anger. He simply looked at the officer the way predators look at prey that has already made its final mistake. Around them, recognition spread like a silent shockwave. A banker stood abruptly and left cash on the table without waiting for a bill. A woman in pearls looked down at her lap, suddenly fascinated by nothing at all. The restaurant manager near the back turned pale, gripping the doorframe as if his legs had forgotten their purpose. Victoria's smile faltered. "Sir," she said sharply, forcing confidence into her voice. "You're interfering with an internal matter. This woman is trespassing." Roman didn't even glance at her. His eyes were fixed on Ava, on the way she held her child, on the red mark on her cheek, on the officer's hand gripping her wrist. "Let her go," Roman said. The officer laughed nervously. "You don't give me orders." Roman tilted his head slightly. Marco stepped forward and leaned in close to the officer's ear. His voice was low, measured, deadly calm. "Do you know who you're touching?" The officer scoffed. Then, Marco whispered a name. The color drained from the man's face. His grip loosened instantly, as if Ava's skin had turned to fire. Roman stepped closer now, placing himself between Ava and the officer without touching her. "Are you hurt?" Roman asked quietly. Ava shook her head, confused, exhausted, still shaking. Roman nodded once, then he turned. And when his gaze landed on Victoria, the room understood something important. This was no longer about a reservation. This was judgment. Victoria straightened her shoulders as Roman's eyes settled on her. Up close, his presence was overwhelming. He was taller than she'd realized, broader, calmer. The kind of calm that didn't come from confidence, but from certainty. The certainty that nothing in the room could touch him. She lifted her chin. "This restaurant belongs to Cruelty Holdings," she said sharply. "And I am authorized to protect its image. You have no right to interfere." Roman studied her in silence. The seconds stretched. Victoria felt it then. The shift. The way the room had aligned itself behind him. The way no one stood beside her anymore. Even the officer had taken a half step back, eyes darting between Roman and the floor. "Protect its image," Roman repeated softly. He glanced around the dining room. The raised phones, the scattered belongings on the marble floor, the crying baby now quiet with exhaustion. "Is this what you call protection?" Victoria's jaw tightened. She walked and dressed like that. With a baby. She caused a disturbance. "She caused nothing," Roman replied. "You did." Victoria laughed, brittle and strained. "Do you know who my father is?" That finally earned her his full attention. "I do," Roman said. She took a breath, emboldened. "Then you know this conversation ends now." Roman took one step closer. "So does your employment." The words hit like a physical blow. Victoria's confidence cracked. "You can't." "I own this restaurant," Roman said calmly. "Every table, every wall, every decision." He turned his head slightly. "Marco." Marco lifted his phone and tapped the screen, effective immediately. Roman continued, eyes never leaving Victoria. "You are terminated. Security footage has been preserved. Legal counsel has been contacted." Victoria's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time that night, fear showed. "You're overreacting," she said weakly. "This can be handled quietly." Roman leaned in just enough for her to hear. "No," he said. "It can't." Behind them, the officer swallowed hard, because he understood something now. If she had fallen, he was already buried. The officer cleared his throat, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Look," he said, trying to regain ground. "Miss doesn't have to go anywhere. Misunderstanding." Tempers flared. "We can all walk away." Roman turned slowly. The officer had dealt with angry men before. Rich men, dangerous men. But this was different. Roman's gaze didn't threaten. It erased. "You assaulted a civilian," Roman said evenly. "You destroyed personal property. You threatened to remove a child without cause." The officer bristled. "You don't tell me how to do my job." Roman nodded once. "You're right." He looked to Marco. "Tell him." Marco stepped forward, voice low but clear. "Internal Affairs has 19 complaints on you. Buried ones, witness intimidation, excessive force, bribes." The officer's knees buckled slightly. "That's impossible," he stammered. "Those files were sealed." Roman's eyes hardened. Nothing stays sealed forever. Victoria took a shaky step back. "This is harassment," she said, desperation creeping in. "My father will not answer your calls tonight." Roman interrupted. He gestured toward the scattered items on the floor. "Pick those up," he said to the officer. The man hesitated. Roman didn't blink. Slowly, humiliatingly, the officer crouched and gathered the diapers, the bottle, the cracked phone. He lifted the crushed photo last. Ava's breath caught. Roman reached out and took it gently, brushing marble dust from the edges before handing it back to her. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Ava nodded, unable to speak. Around them, the restaurant remained frozen. No one filmed now. No one whispered, because everyone understood something had shifted. Not just in the room, but in their own consciences. Silence had chosen a side, and it wasn't theirs. For the first time that night, the restaurant felt small. The chandeliers no longer dazzled. The marble floors no longer gleamed with power. They reflected shame. Ava stood where she was, holding Emma close, her arms aching from the tension she had carried for far too long. The baby had gone quiet now, worn out by fear, her small cheek pressed against her mother's collarbone. Roman turned slightly, scanning the room. 40 tables. Dozens of people. Not one voice had spoken up when a woman was slapped. Not one hand had risen when a baby screamed. "You all saw it," Roman said calmly. "No accusation, no raised voice. That made it worse. You saw a mother humiliated. You saw a child threatened, and you stayed seated." Mo's eyes dropped instantly. A man near the window stared at his napkin as if it held answers. A woman who had been filming slowly slid her phone into her purse, cheeks burning. Roman nodded once, as if he expected nothing else. "Remember this feeling," he said. "Because next time, it may not be someone with protection." He turned back to Ava. "You're free to leave," he said gently. "Or you can stay. The choice is yours." Ava looked around the room, at the empty faces, the lowered gazes, the space where dignity should have been. Then she looked at the table by the window. Table 12. Her breath called. "That table," she said quietly. "That's where my husband proposed." Roman followed her gaze. "I know." Ava hesitated, then nodded. "I'll stay," she said. "Just for a little while?" Roman gestured to a trembling waitress. Please escort Ms. Mitchell to table 12. Warm milk for the baby. And whatever she wants. As Ava was led away, the room parted instinctively. No one looked at her with pity now. They looked with something closer to respect. And Victoria Sterling, standing alone by the reception desk, watched her walk past. Realizing too late that dignity was the one thing money could never buy, table 12 waited exactly where Ava remembered it, by the window, slightly apart from the others, framed by soft garden lights that shimmered like stars caught in glass. For a moment, the noise of the restaurant faded, replaced by memory. Ava sat down slowly, easing Emma into a high chair the staff had rushed to bring. The baby stirred but didn't wake, her small chest rising and falling in uneven breaths, exhaustion finally winning. Warm milk arrived. A blanket. Quiet efficiency without judgment. Ava's hands shook as she wrapped the blanket around her daughter. 3 years ago, she had sat here in a thrift store dress, nervous and unsure, laughing at how out of place she felt. Michael had been across from her, eyes bright despite the sickness already growing inside him. She could almost hear his voice. Just one night, he'd said. Let's pretend we belong. Her throat tightened. Roman approached the table but didn't sit immediately. He paused, as if waiting for permission he rarely needed. May I? He asked, gesturing to the empty chair. Ava nodded. Yes. He sat, resting his forearms on the table, giving her space. For a moment, neither spoke. I didn't come here for trouble, Ava said finally. I almost turned around at the door. Roman nodded. Most people would have. My husband wanted me to come back. She continued softly. Today was our anniversary. He left me money and asked me to sit here again. Just once, Roman didn't interrupt. He proposed right there. Ava said, pointing faintly. With a ring he saved for months to buy. It wasn't expensive, but it was everything. She smiled through tears. I didn't think I'd be slapped for it. Roman's jaw tightened. You were punished for coming, he said. You were punished for reminding someone of what they didn't have. Ava looked at him, surprised by the insight. Roman met her gaze steadily. You stood your ground when it mattered. That takes strength most people never develop. Ava exhaled slowly, some of the weight easing from her chest. Outside the window, the lights flickered gently. Inside, at table 12, a promise was finally being honored, not just to a lost husband, but to herself. And for the first time that night, Ava allowed herself to breathe. The food arrived quietly, one plate at a time, as if the restaurant itself was afraid to intrude. Ava barely touched it at first. Her fingers rested around the edge of the table, knuckles pale, shoulders still drawn tight from hours of holding herself together. Emma slept peacefully now, her small breaths soft and steady, unaware of how close she had come to being torn from the only safety she knew. Roman noticed. You don't have to eat, he said gently. Not yet. Ava nodded, grateful. I'm not usually like this, she said after a moment. I mean shaken. Roman raised an eyebrow slightly but didn't challenge her. I've learned how to survive uncomfortable rooms, she continued. Hospitals teach you that. Foster homes teach you that. Roman's eyes sharpened, not with judgment, but attention. I grew up moving from place to place, Ava said. People decide who you are before you ever speak. You learn to stay small, to not be trouble. She paused, swallowing hard. Tonight was different, she said. Tonight it wasn't just about me. Roman glanced at Emma. She was scared. Ava whispered. And when he said they'd take her, something in me just broke open. I didn't care what happened to me anymore. Roman leaned back slightly, absorbing every word. That's when people become dangerous, he said quietly. One fear loses its power. Ava gave a small, tired smile. I didn't feel brave. I felt desperate. Those are often the same thing, Roman replied. Silence settled between them again, comfortable now, not heavy. I don't know what happens next, Ava said finally. I just know I couldn't walk away. Roman looked at her for a long moment. Walking away is easy, he said. Standing still is not. He reached into his jacket and placed a simple card on the table. No title, no logo, just a name and a number. If you ever need help, he said, call. Ava glanced at the card but didn't pick it up. I don't want favors, she said. Roman nodded. I know. That was why then offered. And in that quiet understanding, something unspoken settled between them. Respect, not rescue. Outside the window, the garden lights continued to glow. Inside, a woman who had survived far worse than tonight finally allowed herself to be seen. Roman stood before Ava finished her meal. I'll take care of something, he said calmly. I'll be back. She nodded, too drained to ask what that meant. As Roman walked away, the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted again. This time with fear. Victoria Sterling stood near the reception desk, arms wrapped tightly around herself, makeup streaked, confidence completely gone. The officer hovered nearby, sweat darkening the collar of his uniform, eyes darting toward every exit. They both watched Roman approach. Victoria straightened instinctively. "Mr. Corsetti," she began, voice shaking. "This has gone far enough. My father." Roman raised one finger. She stopped mid-sentence. "I watched you," Roman said quietly, from the moment she walked in. For Victoria's lips trembled. "I didn't know who she was." "That," Roman replied, "is the problem." He turned slightly so the security cameras above the entrance were clearly visible. "You assaulted a guest. You used dehumanizing language. You called law enforcement to escalate a situation you created." Victoria's knees weakened. "Please, this can be fixed." Roman's eyes were ice. "It already is." He nodded once. From the side hallway, two men in suits stepped forward. "Legal counsel and private security." "Ms. Sterling," one of them said formally, "you are being detained pending investigation for assault and discrimination." Victoria gasped. "You can't do this." Roman leaned in just enough for only her to hear. "You thought power meant never facing consequences," he said. "Tonight, you learned what it really means." He turned next to the officer. "You threatened to remove a child without cause," Roman said evenly. "That threat alone ends your career." The officer's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Roman looked at him one last time. "Enjoy explaining yourself." As Roman walked away, the restaurant exhaled in unison. The people who had stayed silent finally understood something important: cruelty doesn't disappear when ignored. It waits. And tonight it had been called to account. Ava didn't know it yet, but the night had already left the restaurant. At a corner table near the wall, an elderly woman lowered her phone slowly, hands trembling, not from fear but from resolve. She had captured everything. The slap, the insults, the badge misused, the moment a powerful man stepped in and said stop. She didn't ask permission, she didn't hesitate. Before Ava finished her dessert, the video was already uploading. Across the city, notifications lit up phones. By the time Roman returned to the table, his phone vibrated once in his pocket. He glanced at the screen, then slipped it away, expression unchanged. "It started," he said quietly. Ava looked up. "What has?" "The truth moving faster than any of us," he replied. At the reception desk, Victoria Sterling sat stiffly between two security officers, her earlier hysteria replaced by shock. The officers stood apart, staring at the floor, knowing the walls closing in weren't physical, they were digital. Phones buzzed at nearby tables. Whispers returned, different now. "Did you see this? That's this place. That woman has a baby." Someone near the bar gasped. "It's already everywhere." Ava felt a tightening in her chest. "I didn't want attention," she said softly. Roman met her eyes. "You didn't ask for it, but silence doesn't protect people like you. Exposure does." Outside, sirens passed in the distance. Not for Ava, not tonight, but the sound still made her flinch. Roman noticed. "Whatever happens next," he said, "you won't face it alone." Ava looked at Emma, sleeping peacefully, her tiny hand curled around nothing at all. For the first time since Michael's death, Ava felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not relief, not victory, safety, and beyond the restaurant's walls, the world was already deciding who it believed. This time, it wasn't choosing silence. The ride home was silent. A black sedan waited outside the restaurant, engine humming softly as Roman opened the door for Ava. She hesitated for only a second before stepping inside. Adjusting Emma carefully into the car seat, a staff member had rushed out moments earlier. The city passed by in blurred streaks of light. Ava rested her forehead against the cool glass, exhaustion finally sinking deep into her bones. Her body felt heavy, as if she'd been holding herself upright for days instead of hours. "You don't have to say anything," Roman said from the driver's seat, eyes on the road. "Tonight was a lot." Ava nodded. Her voice felt too fragile to trust. When the car slowed in front of her building, Roman's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The paint peeled from the brick walls. A flickering hallway light buzzed weakly above the entrance. "This is home," Ava said quietly. Roman parked and turned off the engine. "For now." She looked at him, unsure what that meant. He handed her a small envelope. "This isn't charity," he said before she could refuse. "It's legal counsel and protection. Nothing more." Ava studied the envelope, then nodded. "Thank you." She stepped out into the night, lifting Emma gently from the seat. As she reached the building's door, she paused and looked back. Roman was still there, watching, not possessive, not intrusive, just present. Upstairs, Ava laid Emma into her crib and sat on the edge of the bed, the night replaying itself behind her closed eyes. The slap, the badge, the moment she said no. Her phone buzzed, one message, then another, then dozens, links, headlines, notifications. She stared at the screen, heart pounding. The world had seen her. And there was no turning back now. Down on the street, Roman started the engine again, his phone pressed to his ear. "Begin," he said calmly. The real consequences were only just beginning. Ava didn't sleep. She lay on her narrow bed fully dressed, one arm draped protectively over Emma's crib, her eyes fixed on the ceiling as her phone vibrated again and again beside her. By morning, the video had crossed continents, millions of views, thousands of comments per minute. Strangers argued, cried, raged, defended her, defended the baby, condemned the restaurant, demanded consequences. The slap replayed endlessly. The officer's voice slowed down and dissected. Victoria's words were quoted in headlines: "A mother humiliated while holding her baby. Power meets the wrong woman." Silence in a luxury restaurant sparks national outrage. Ava sat up slowly, heart racing. She hadn't wanted this. But it was happening whether she wanted it or not. At the restaurant, chaos replaced elegance. Management meetings began before sunrise. Lawyers filled offices. Staff whispered in hallways that had once been silent. Phones rang nonstop. Victoria Sterling watched the same video from a private room, her face pale, hands shaking. Her father's name was already trending. The officer's badge number had been identified. And in a quiet office overlooking the city, Roman listened as Marco listed developments in a flat, efficient voice. Internal Affairs opened an investigation. Marco said, "The restaurant board is distancing itself, and 3 previous complaints against Sterling have surfaced." Roman nodded once. "Good," he said. "Let the truth finish what the slap started." Back in her apartment, Ava finally stood and crossed the room to her daughter's crib. Emma stirred, eyes blinking open, then smiled. Ava broke. She pressed her forehead gently against the crib rail, silent tears falling, not from shame, not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization that for the first time in her life, the world was listening. And it wasn't laughing, it was watching, and justice, slow and heavy, had begun to move. By noon, the story had names. Not just faces, names: Ava Mitchell, Victoria Sterling, Officer Daniel Harper. Once the names surfaced, the internet did what it always did: it dug. Former diners came forward first. Then former employees, screenshots, emails, quiet complaints that had once been ignored were dragged into daylight. A woman posted about being turned away while pregnant because she ruined the ambience. A couple shared a receipt proving they had a reservation, one that somehow vanished. A former hostess admitted she'd been told, explicitly, who not to seat. The pattern was unmistakable. Inside a downtown precinct, Officer Harper sat alone in an interview room, badge and weapon placed carefully on the table in front of him. The walls were bare, the chair uncomfortable. The confidence he'd worn so easily the night before had evaporated. He asked for a lawyer. This time, no one rushed to help. Across the city, Victoria Sterling watched her reflection in a bathroom mirror, eyes red, makeup smeared. Her phone lay face down on the counter. She hadn't answered it in hours. Her father's last message replayed in her head. "This time, I can't fix it." For the first time in her life, there was no door to step through. No name to invoke, no power left to borrow. Back in her apartment, Ava sat at the small kitchen table, Emma in her lap, the envelope Roman had given her unopened beside a cold cup of tea. She felt hollow. Not triumphant, not vindicated, just tired. She looked down at her daughter and whispered, "I didn't plan to fight anyone. I just wanted one quiet night." Emma gurgled softly, unaware. Outside, the city moved on, buses honking, people rushing, headline dating, but something fundamental had shifted. Silence had a cost. And for the people who had relied on it, the bill had finally arrived. The courthouse steps were already crowded before sunrise. News vans lined the street, cables snaking across the pavement, reporters rehearsing lines with practiced urgency. The story had grown beyond a viral clip. It had become a symbol of class, of power, of what happened when cruelty met the wrong kind of witness. Ava arrived quietly through a side entrance, Emma bundled against her chest. She didn't look like a headline. She looked like a tired mother. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with restrained chaos. Lawyers whispered. Cameras clicked. The air carried the weight of expectation. Victoria Sterling sat at the defense table, unrecognizable without designer polish. Her posture was rigid, her hands clenched, eyes fixed straight ahead as if refusing to acknowledge the room. The officer sat several rows back, no uniform, no badge, his confidence stripped down to a wrinkled suit and a face etched with panic. Ava took her seat near the back. She hadn't come for revenge. She'd come because silence had failed too many times before. The judge entered. The room stood. As proceedings began, evidence unfolded calmly, methodically. The video played once, only once, and that was enough. The slap sounded louder here, stripped of music and distraction. Witnesses spoke. A former hostess, a past diner, a staff member who had stayed quiet too long. Each voice added weight. Ava listened without expression, Emma asleep against her shoulder. Across the aisle, Roman sat unseen by cameras, watching quietly, untouched by spectacle. He didn't need attention. Outcomes mattered more. When Ava was called to speak, she stood slowly. "I didn't come here to make an example of anyone," she said evenly. "I came because my child deserves to grow up in a world where dignity isn't something you have to earn." The courtroom was silent. For the first time in a long time, power wasn't speaking. Truth was. And everyone was listening. The rulings came faster than anyone expected. The judge's voice was steady, practiced, unshaken by the cameras or the public pressure pressing in from every corner of the room. This wasn't theater to her. It was law. Victoria Sterling was found guilty of assault and discriminatory conduct. Gasps rippled through the gallery as the words landed. Victoria's shoulders collapsed inward, the fight draining from her face as if someone had finally turned off a switch. The sentence followed: probation, mandatory counseling, community service, fines that money alone could not soften. A permanent mark that no family name could erase. Her father never looked up. Then came the officer's case: abuse of authority, unlawful detention, threatening removal of a child without cause. The judge paused before delivering the final line. "A badge is not permission to terrorize," she said. The officer's suspension became termination, his pension frozen pending further review. Criminal charges scheduled to proceed. When the gavel struck, it echoed like a closing door. Outside, the crowd erupted: shouts, questions, cameras flashing. But Ava didn't stop. She held Emma tighter and walked forward, past microphones and strangers calling her name. She didn't owe anyone a speech. Across the street, Roman watched from a distance, hands in his coat pockets, expression unreadable. Justice had been served, but he knew better than anyone that justice never erased scars. It only made room for healing. As Ava reached the waiting car, she looked back once at the courthouse. The building stood unchanged. But she wasn't. And neither was the world that had finally chosen to see her. Bielok 19 Orinor Latar. The sunlight pouring through the hospital window was warm and steady, the kind that made everything feel possible. Ava stood in her small office, adjusting a framed certificate on the wall. Beneath it sat a photo of Emma, now walking, laughing, her cheeks round and her eyes bright with curiosity. The chaos of that night felt distant now, not forgotten, but transformed. Life hadn't become perfect, but it had become stable. After the trial, Ava had returned to work quietly. She hadn't sought interviews or attention. She focused on patience, on night shifts, on learning to breathe again without fear. Over time, opportunities followed: training programs, a promotion, a chance to build a future that didn't feel fragile. The restaurant had changed too. New management, new staff. Clear policies posted at the door about dignity and equal treatment. The table by the window remained, but it no longer symbolized exclusion. It had become something else, a reminder. Roman visited rarely. When he did, it wasn't with grand gestures or promises. Just coffee, walks in the park, listening. He never tried to replace what Ava had lost. He respected it. That mattered more than anything. One evening, Ava watched Emma chase pigeons across the grass, laughing uncontrollably, and realized something had shifted inside her. She no longer flinched at loud voices. She no longer felt small in crowded rooms. Standing up once had changed the way she stood forever. Ava reached into her pocket and felt the edge of a worn card. The same one Roman had given her that night. She had never needed to call. Knowing she could had been enough. Some stories end with justice. The rare ones continue with peace. And this one wasn't over yet. Late one evening, long after Emma had fallen asleep, Ava sat alone on the couch with her phone resting in her hands. She wasn't recording, she was recording. The camera light blinked softly as she took a breath, steady and unafraid. "People keep asking me why I didn't walk away that night," Ava said calmly. "Why I didn't stay quiet. Why I didn't lower my head and leave." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "The answer is simple," she continued. "Because silence teaches people that cruelty is allowed. And because the moment you accept humiliation, you pass it on to the next person." She glanced toward the bedroom where Emma slept. "I didn't have power that night. I didn't have money. I didn't have protection," Ava said. "But I had dignity. And sometimes, that's enough to stop everything." Her voice softened. "If you're watching this and you've been treated like you don't belong, at work, in public, anywhere, please remember this: you don't have to earn respect. You already deserve it." She looked straight into the camera. "And if you ever see injustice happening to someone else, don't look away. Don't stay seated. Don't wait for someone else to step in." She ended the recording, set the phone down, and leaned back. Outside, the city hummed quietly. In another part of town, a powerful man watched the same video in silence, a faint smile touching his lips. Not of pride, but of something deeper. Relief, because the promise made by an Year-old boy to never let cruelty go unanswered had finally come full circle. Not through violence, not through fear, but through one woman who stood still when the world tried to push her down. And that was enough to change everything.